and a warm welcome to Debating Russia, Voice of Russia's political discussion program. I'm your moderator, Peter Lavelle. Edward Snowden, called a traitor by some and a hero by many, remains stateless and in limbo here in Moscow. And Russia, if it wanted to or not, has played an important role in this story. To discuss the Russia angle of the Snowden affair, I'm joined by my guests in London. Mark Pritchard, he's a Conservative MP. Naomi, Colvin, she's a spokesperson for UK Friends of Bradley Manning. And here in our studio in Moscow, I'm with Vladimir Batuk. He's from the Institute of U.S. and Canadian Studies. Mark, in London, how do you feel about Mr. Snowden still in limbo here in Moscow?
Well, I think there's a real opportunity for the Russian government to do what the Chinese government didn't do, and that is to recognize international law, to recognize requests from friends and allies, and to ensure that Mr. Snowden is on a plane to Washington rather than a plane to Caracas. I mean, one of the great ironies in this story, if irony is the correct word, and that is Mr. Snowden has said that he did what he did, that is, leaking classified and secret documents, in order to be a champion of liberty to protect people from oppression, and yet he chose to do that in the People's Republic of China. And I think his story would be a lot more credible, and his claims a lot more credible, if he'd chosen to do it in Washington, D.C. or in London. But he hasn't done that, so he's gone from the People's Republic of China now to Russia. Russia has its own challenges with freedom of speech, and now seeks to possibly go to Venezuela.
I think most people around the world don't see it as a freedom of speech issue. It's about the clandestine spying upon citizens in the United States and Europe and around the world. I mean, it's a different story here, and obviously you do know that there's no extradition law between the United States and Russia, so Russia isn't doing anything illegal.
Russia and the United States need to work very closely together, as indeed the United Kingdom and Russia, on a whole range of things, not least counterterrorism. Russia has its own history and challenges around counterterrorism issues, so I think it's in everybody's mutual interest, mutual national interest, mutual national security interest, that the issue of Mr. Snowden is resolved soon, and is resolved in a way that recognizes the offended party. And the offended party is the United States, whose national security has been undermined as a result of Mr. Snowden's actions. And my view is that this is an opportunity for Mr. Putin to perhaps mend some fences, if any fences have been broken or harmed over the last few weeks or months, by not doing what the People's Republic of China did, and that is allowing Mr. Snowden to flee American justice. If Mr. Snowden is confident about the claims he's made, let him make them in a court in Washington, D.C. or in New York. But I don't think hiding away in some transit lounge in Moscow really helps his case look credible.
Well, his case has helped because of the case of Mr. Bradley Manning. That's most likely the reason. Let me bring in Vladimir here with me in Moscow. It's really interesting a few days ago that Vladimir Putin actually did reach out the hand and said that, Mr. Snowden, you can stay here if you want, but you have to stop doing what you're doing. And he refused that. And as we speak right now, he's waiting for, hopefully, in his case, asylum in Venezuela. I don't agree with Mark, and Mark probably isn't surprised by that, but I think one thing we would agree on is that we're seeing the United States and Russia try to manage this situation here. When Vladimir Putin made that statement, he even pointed out to the Russian people in the world, that it was very odd for him to say these kinds of words, because he usually is very, he's a tough guy.
I suppose that Mr. Putin doesn't want to spoil the US-Russian relations any further because of Mr. Snowden. To the contrary, right now they in Moscow see a new chance for the US-Russian relations. After this Boston attack, they are seeing the resumption of close cooperation between Russian and American secret services against international terrorism. And the cooperation with the United States in such spheres as non-proliferation, nuclear arms control, economics, etc. are also very important for the Kremlin. So they in the Kremlin don't want to make this Snowden affair in the first shot in the new Cold War. However, they in the Kremlin have very serious limits because of the Russian public opinion.
Exactly. Let me ask Mark about that, because that's really the crux of the matter in Russia. It was that most Russians are, to be honest with you, tired of this story. They really are tired of it. They think Mr. Snowden should go. You can't live at the airport, even though it's a nicer airport than it used to be. It's turning into a headache here. Mr. Putin has reached out the hand saying, you're going to have to leave, Mr. Snowden, take care of your affairs.
Well, I think that you can only drink so much airport coffee. I completely agree with that, however good it is. And I think, this could be an opportunity for Mr. Putin. It's no great surprise that the American intelligence agencies or the British intelligence agencies or the Russian or Chinese intelligence agencies are very busy trying to ensure that their respective capitals and nations are kept safe from military threats and cyber threats, from economic threats, a whole range of threats. So there was nothing new or nothing surprising. I think what surprised people was the allegation of the scale of the eavesdropping and alleged eavesdropping and intercepts. But again,
don't you think that's a good thing to know? Shouldn't people know that?
Well, I think
shouldn't this be debated in public?
I think people do know that, and I think people regard national security and ensuring that we're able to stop terrorists, whether on the streets of Moscow or London or Washington, getting away with mass murder of innocent men, women, and children. I think that's necessary, and certainly in the United Kingdom.
But how is Snowden compromised? Well, everything you just said, has he compromised it at all?
You know, whether it be the Russian authorities, British authorities, American authorities, the fact is the intelligence agencies in all three countries have been very successful in intercepting and stopping further terrorist attacks. So the need for intelligence agencies and the need for them to be able to operate in secret about their techniques and their processes, I think is absolutely vital. What Mr. Snowden has done has unhelpfully put all three countries potentially at risk if and terrorism is extraterritorial. Doesn't recognize borders. There are interconnected networks, and if terrorists, whether they be in Moscow or London or Washington, change their behavior,
if you'll forgive me, Mark, it sounds like you're describing the NSA to me, not a terrorist group. Okay, I'd like to have Vladimir.
Come on, Peter. I think the NSA cares more about Russia's national security than, shall we say, certain terrorist groups from the Caucasus area or Southern Caucasus area, and other parts of the former Soviet
If that
Union.
had been the case, then we would have had cooperation on what was going on in Boston and the Russian security forces, but we didn't, unfortunately.
Well,
okay, Vladimir, you want to say something?
Peter, if I may.
Let's go to Vladimir real quick.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Putin has some limits. I mean, his freedom of hands here in the Snowden affair, because of the Russian public opinion. Though sometimes they in the West describe Mr. Putin as a dictator, he have to pay very serious attention to the Russian public opinion. And here in this Snowden affair, we see a very, very strange picture, where both traditional conservative anti-American, so to say, Russian circles and pro-Western liberals are unanimous demanding from the Russian government to grant political asylum to Mr. Snowden. For a variety of reasons. Some because of traditional anti-Americanism, others because Mr. Snowden is political dissident, he is a liberty fighter, he defends human rights. And under that situation, Mr. Putin simply cannot give Mr. Snowden back.
Well, that's why the compromise has been made here, is to give him the opportunity to leave. We have to remember that it was the American authorities that revoked his passport, so he can't move. Mark, do you want to react to anything we just heard there?
Well, I can understand why the Russian population and people are getting rather fed up of it, because I don't think they would be surprised about some of the allegations that Mr. Snowden has made. I think what they would not be happy about if a similar person working for a Russian intelligence agency went public saying how they process some of this material and some of their techniques. Because, as I was going to say earlier, the fact that is that I think Mr. Snowden has potentially put lives at risk by basically ensuring that terrorist groups are more aware rather than less aware of some of those techniques and processes. If they then change the way they communicate, either by email or by text or by telephone or whatever it might be, electronic means of communication, and switch to a less technical form of communication, that it
Mark,
may be harder.
Don't you seriously think they're already doing that? I mean, seriously. You think they're going to be sending messages on Facebook about a terrorist idea? I really find that kind of hard to believe.
Well, I refer you to your own intelligence agencies, and I think they will confirm that they themselves have been successful in stopping terrorist attacks as a result of the Russian intelligence agencies being able to monitor electronic communications. If that is not the case, then perhaps somebody can deny it in Moscow. But I know it is the case that there have been terrorist attacks stopped as a result of intercepts of either telephones, emails, or texts, or all three.
Does that justify spying on hundreds of millions of people? Is everybody a suspect in this?
Look, I know Mr. Putin is a very good fisherman. I'm hopeless at fishing. But if you go out sea fishing or even lake fishing, you put in a great big net, and when you pull that net up, there are sometimes fish you want to keep, and sometimes fish you want to put back into the sea or back into the lake. There's a lot of information out there. Yes, some of it is targeted. Not all of it can be targeted. Therefore, it is a big net of information. But only those fish that are, and only those individuals, those persons of interest, are kept in the boat. The others are put back in the sea or the lake.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia from the heart of London. On weekdays, we broadcast live from 4 p.m. until 8. We'll bring you news, current affairs, features and debate. You can listen to us on digital radio and online. Visit ruvr.co.uk.
I have to step in here. You're listening to Debating Russia on Voice of Russia. I'm Peter Lavelle. Mark, you know as well as I do the history of these agencies since the end of the Second World War, during the Cold War. Do you trust these people to say, oh, we better not look at this fish, we better give it back? Because someone will say, I might be able to use that one day against someone. That's what I'm getting at. It's a privacy issue.
Well, I certainly need to be educated about how the intelligence agencies in Russia have parliamentary oversight or scrutiny. But I certainly know how it's done here in the United Kingdom and in the United States. And there is clear oversight by elected members of Parliament on the Intelligence and Security Committee here at the House of Commons. We also have the National Security Strategy Committee, which I sit on. And in the United States, there is very, very rigorous oversight by senators.
And you have the head of the NSA perjure himself in front of Congress.
Well,
that's your oversight?
Well, I think that, well, forgive me, I don't want to say we've got more oversight than you or you've got more oversight than us, but let's just look at the facts.
But that's not the point of our conversation. The point of our conversation is, what to do with Mr. Snowden. And Russia has stepped forward and actually compromised. I know that's hard to believe. Mr. Putin did compromise and said, Mr. Snowden, if you're going to keep doing what you're doing, you have to leave.
Well, of course, that was a few days after Mr. Snowden had rather sort of copious amounts of coffee and no doubt lots of conversations with an eclectic mix of people from all parts of Moscow. So that is welcome.
I don't think that's confirmed whatsoever. There's no evidence of that, Mark, whatsoever, that he's talked to anybody here outside of airport personnel. Seriously.
I mean, again, there's only so many books in the hotel, the airport bookstand you can read. I don't know. All I would say is that where do we go from here? And where we go from here, there's an opportunity for Mr. Putin to ensure that Mr. Snowden goes to the right capital, not the wrong capital, in order that we don't...
It's not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen the way you'd like to happen. It's already over. That moment is over. As Vladimir sitting here with me pointed out, Putin has public opinion at home. I mean, if he did that would be quite disastrous for his political career. Vladimir.
Yes, that's true. And if they decided to give Mr. Snowden back to the United States, for his citizens he will look like American puppet. No more, no less. And that will be a catastrophe for his political career. He is presented to be a Russian nationalist, a political figure who managed to recover Russia after the collapse in the last decade of the 20th century. But giving back Mr. Snowden, he'll present himself to the world as a just American political puppet. And that will be a catastrophe.
It looks like, Mark, to me, it doesn't look like Snowden really has a whole lot more to say. I think he's had his moment, because if anything more is going to be leaked, it's already been leaked to media agencies around the world, the ones he chose, The Guardian, Washington Post. His moment is over as far as this part of the story, is his leaks, as it were. So let him go to Venezuela.
Well, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see. One of the interesting questions might be out of this is how long has Mr. Snowden had a relationship with the People's Republic of China? That's the first place he went. Was this just an afterthought in Hawaii one afternoon? He grabbed his bags, grabbed some data and a data stick and went off to Hong Kong? Or was there a longer-term relationship with Chinese officials? I don't know, but these are sort of questions I think need to be answered.
So you want to look at the espionage angle?
Well, I don't think Mr. Snowden did this to help the United States. I don't believe he's a people's champion. I believe he's a traitor. He signed and agreed and swore an oath of allegiance and loyalty to the United States and to uphold the national security of the United States, amongst other things. Clearly, he was
a contractor. Okay,
yeah,
he wasn't in the working for the U.S. government. He was a contractor making a lot of money.
Yeah, he was a contractor working originally for one agency and then another. But contractors are still under the same obligations to protect the national security of the United States. Clearly, this is not protecting the national security of the USA.
Well, he did this to defend the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution.
Well, my personal
Isn't that
view
a higher cause? Is that a higher cause?
Well, well, in that case, you have to be careful of all your intelligence operatives in Russia, because if we take that route, then every single person working for every agency in Moscow potentially could be a people's champion, but in so doing, in your view, perhaps, or on the views of some people, they'd be undermining Russia's national security. I don't think even Mr. Putin wants to do
let's
that.
look at Mr. Snowden's words. Let's just look at his words. He said there should be a public debate about this. That's why Mr. Snowden did this, and I think a lot of people like him. The demonization of him, he's a narcissist or something like that, the debate should be on what he did, and I think one element of the debate that hasn't hardly been touched in Western mainstream media is how private companies were involved working with the NSA and these other agencies to spy on hundreds of millions of people. What about the trust element of that? When you look at Google, Facebook, all these other things.
Well, I think if shareholders within those companies, whether institutional shareholders or individuals, have concerns about those companies working in cooperation, allegedly, with intelligence agencies, then they can express their concerns in the normal way as shareholders. I think whilst it's right that we have...
Mark, on the first page of Facebook, they tell you, we protect your privacy. I don't need to be a shareholder. You have to believe the services that you're being provided are being protected.
This is the Voice of Russia, broadcasting from the heart of London. From Monday to Friday, we're live here on digital from 4 p.m. until 8. We're also online at ruvr.co.uk. Tune in for current affairs, news, arts and debate.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. You're listening to Debating Russia here on Voice of Russia. I'm your moderator, Peter Lavelle. Okay, I want Naomi Colvin. She's a spokesperson for the UK Friends of Bradley Manning. Have you been listening to part of our discussion here?
Yeah, I've been listening to the last part. It's been very interesting. Thank you.
I'd like you to jump in and just express your thoughts.
Oh, goodness. Well, I don't think there can be any doubt that Edward Snowden did what he did in the interests of the American public. He has explained his reasons very eloquently, and it's not a demonstration against secrecy per se, because some things governments do need to be confidential, and we all know that. If you look at what he says, what he seems to be most unhappy about are officials in US government misleading Congress, misleading the US people. It's not so much a problem of secrecy as it is a problem of accountability, fundamentally. And in terms of Russia's role, yes, I think it's fairly clear that the Russians have taken an opportunity to stand up to the US, possibly in a slightly opportunistic way. It's not the case, I think, there's necessarily a great deal or any sympathy in the Russian government.
Well, Naomi, I think it's fair to say, in watching this entire experience with Mr. Snowden, yes, indeed, I think it's fair to say that the Russian government liked to tweak the nose of the Americans when this happened. It was a public relations issue. Everybody was like, oh my goodness, how did he get here? But then it's worn off, okay? My sense is it's worn off and people want to move on. You're a spokesperson for the UK Friends of Bradley Manning. How do you compare Mr. Snowden and Mr. Manning?
Well, in terms of where they come from, they're very similar in many respects. They're of the same generation. They've grown up with the same ideas about how information should be shared and how governments should be responsible to their publics. Clearly, what has happened to Bradley Manning in the United States, including the 9 months of detention, which is contrary to US, yes, exactly, contrary to US military rules and criticised by the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture. I don't think there's any doubt that what's happened to Bradley Manning has been critical in not just ensuring that Edward Snowden feels that he can't get a fair hearing within the US, which I think is fair, and Daniel Ellsberg wrote a very strong op-ed for the Washington Post this week in which he says exactly that. But also I think it's been critical in ensuring that not only that Edward Snowden felt he had to apply for asylum, but that those asylum applications have been accepted by many countries. Of course, the United States has not done itself any favours in that either.
The United States has broken international law repeatedly when it comes to Mr. Snowden. When someone has their passport revoked and they're looking for refugee status, you should not impede that. That is part of universal human rights. I mean, Mr. Snowden is being hunted down. He has been given no paperwork, and the United States continues to want to believe that he's a threat to national security. If I can turn to Vladimir here, an interesting example. Let's say an Iranian scientist flees Tehran, ends up in New York, and says, I have all of these secrets of the Iranian secret services and their nuclear program on top of it. He would be considered a hero in the United States.
Absolutely.
He would be given the citizenship, money, everything he wanted.
Yeah.
So, the double standard.
That's true, and probably these double standards on the part of official Washington is the reason why so different countries such as Russia, China, Venezuela, Bolivia, and a lot of others are so unanimous in this Snowden affair.
Well, the thing is that, if I can stay with Vladimir here, is that this is a reflection, another story here of how Latin America, South America feels about American hegemony. For 200 years, they've been under the thumb of the United States, and they continue to be, particularly in Venezuela, is being targeted all of the time. So this is this blowback for the Americans here. If we can go back to Naomi, Bradley Manning's trial is going on here. In your mind, is there any possibility at all he's going to get justice? He's getting 20 years for sure. We all know that. Absolutely 20 years, okay? What's the point at this point to continue this trial? It's just I think it's a message to Mr. Snowden and to other whistleblowers. We're going to crucify this guy in front of all of you, even against international law, against human rights, but they're going to continue this crucifixion as a reminder to everyone else.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It's a sign to others, and it's supposed to deter others. If you look at the way the American government has treated national security whistleblowers over the past 10 years, Thomas Drake, an NSA analyst, went through all of the official channels in raising his complaints, and his complaints were complaints about inefficiency and waste of money, primarily. He was charged under the Espionage Act, and he was hounded. His livelihood absolutely destroyed. And here's someone who went through the official channels. You look at Bradley Manning. Bradley Manning was basically tortured in a US military brig and in a military base in Kuwait for 9 months, and is now being ludicrously overcharged. As you say, he's admitted to acts which could put him away for 20 years. His prosecution is looking for 150 years plus life. I don't think they'll get that, and in fact, their case is not doing too well in court. But, he's going to come out of it with a substantial sentence. And with Ed Snowden, again, it's racked up even more. You have the Americans pressuring European governments not to give diplomatic planes airspace, which I think is unprecedented almost. And they're issuing speculative extradition notices to countries. It's bizarre.
It's very interesting. I'd like to point out to our listeners here that the same countries that were hounding the Bolivian president they are the same countries, I want to be careful about this, that worked very closely with the United States with rendition, okay? This is the same mindset that is out there. Vladimir, can you explain how Russians look at Mr. Snowden sitting there in limbo in Sheremetyevo airport?
For Russians, this situation seems rather strange, and the best outcome out of this affair is Mr. Snowden is leaving somewhere to Venezuela or to Bolivia or somewhere else, at least before the September summit with Mr. Obama, because there are some leakage that there will be no meeting, no Mr. Obama visit to the Russian Federation if Mr. Snowden is still in Sheremetyevo airport.
Okay.
So at least before September, this situation should be settled somehow.
Politics always invades it. Naomi, looking at Ed Snowden and looking at Bradley Manning, do you think that they're going to inspire more whistleblowers, or will there be the chilling effect? And I would like to point out, too, that a lot of media has been very chilled by the knowledge that we're all being spied upon quite a bit. So, are they inspiration, or is there a chilling effect?
What made me happiest about Ed Snowden doing what he did and standing up was the knowledge that even after everything that has happened to Bradley Manning, people are still going to stand up for what they believe in. And we need more people of conscience in official positions. You can look at what is happening with Snowden and Manning. Possibly, it's a generational shift as well. Large government bureaucracies need young people with technical expertise. There is, as I say, a shift in perspective in the younger generation. And generally, and I hope we see more of this in the future, because if you look at the long-term aspects, or what we can say the medium-term aspects of Bradley Manning's releases from the Arab Spring to the official withdrawal of US troops in Iraq, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I think that disclosure is one of the best catalysts we have for social change. So fingers crossed we will see more of it.
Naomi, one of the things we had Mark Pritchard, a Conservative MP, on earlier in the program, one of the things that really bothers me about the kind of environment that we live in right now is that there's, again, this focus on Snowden. There's the Bradley Manning trial going on in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but a lot of these private companies, Google, Facebook, all these other telecommunications companies, it seems to me they've gotten off the hook by focusing the attention on individuals, these bad people, as I would like to call them. But it seems to me there's a lack of trust in a lot of these services that we give so much of our information to and so open to, and they promise so much to protect us. And now we've found out that it's completely reversed. If NSA snaps their finger, oh yeah, here you go, here's the file.
Sure, I think that's problematic. You know, we now know that services based in the UK or US that have information travelling via UK or US cloud services which are based here, you cannot now be confident of the security of your information. I think we should add that it's not just the PRISM allegations of whether it's direct access or not, but certainly quite eager cooperation with the US government. In this country, the Tempora program, the GCHQ program, whereby the cables coming in and out of this country are tapped, that was done with the cooperation of private companies as well. And it's a sign of the extreme lack of accountability we have, certainly here on these kind of issues. And I guess in the States as well, or I think the States are in a slightly better position than we are, that these companies can do these kind of things which impact millions of people well beyond their own customer base, and there is no exposure or comeback for it at all. Yes, it's very, very troubling. I'm
really hoping that Bradley Manning and Ed Snowden will continue to make us think and have a public debate about these issues. I want to thank my guests, Mark Pritchard earlier, Naomi Colvin, and here Vladimir Batuk, for joining me here on Debating Russia on Voice of Russia.